Thanks for sticking with us on another warm day when you could have snuck out to Brockwell Park and grabbed a bottle of sparkling rosé on your way. So at least it's nice and cool in here. That's quite a hard act to follow, really. I'm that non-expert expert. So sorry about that. Just put that on the table. I absolutely acknowledge the limited scope of my experience. But I'm here to kind of share some stuff that I've observed and through talking. So I work with New Philanthropy Capital. I've been working with Fulfilling Lives over the last year or more around some of this kind of systems thinking and systems change work. And we also do that with a number of other agencies. So I suppose that kind of gives me an opportunity to see a few things that are kind of going on around this space and sort of think about, what we can, sort of lessons and that we can draw from those different approaches. So I'm kind of here to talk a little bit about some of those, my reflections on some of those for now. So yeah, for the next kind of 90 minutes, we are going to be thinking about, as Christina sort of set up, how we can design our systems so they are so having kind of a user experience at the center, so they are, so that is the norm in a way that it currently largely isn't. And to do that, I'll offer a quick bit of framing, and then we'll hear some further real life examples and experiences, not just from a system user perspective, but also from a service delivery perspective. And then in our tables, we're going to then look at different aspects of these systems and how they would need to be different if this kind of user-centered approach was to become the norm. So I'll start off with the sort of ubiquitous definitions part. When what do I mean by user-centered systems? I think really Christina's really just kind of encapsulated it. I'm aware that I'm aware because it happens to me a lot as a bit of a kind of professional hazard, that talking about systems can really turn people off. It can kind of alienate people or confuse people, or people just go, systems, complicated. And so I just want to kind of acknowledge that some people might not connect necessarily with that language. In reality, we all live in, when we're talking about systems, we're really talking about how our societies are organized. And the ways in which our society is organized, obviously, as we all know, have an often kind of predetermining effect on people's lives. And so if we want to kind of, achieve widespread change across those people's lives, then we have to think about the systems that continue to kind of create those outcomes. And often these systems, whether we're talking about justice systems or support systems or other kinds of systems, are designed, insofar as they are designed, but they're sort of developed for their own needs. For example, to maximize efficiency, to produce a particular outcome, that they're all sort of seeking, and then people are put through that system in order to kind of achieve that outcome. And that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of people's lives and the situations of people using those systems. So that's a very kind of crude characterization. I obviously acknowledge that it's not a black and white thing. There's some great kind of practice and great progress is happening. But generally, as has been reflected, the systems that we have don't put users at the center. So this concept, is really trying to think about how we can do that, and not just from a service delivery perspective, but from the perspective of all the stuff that needs to happen around that, so that these sorts of brilliant approaches that we're hearing about can become the norm. So this is user-centered systems. It's a phrase. It's not kind of, the language is always imperfect and imprecise, and that's kind of inevitable. And we can talk about user-led or person-led or user-centered or bottom-up or asset-based. And to me, this is all part of a kind of a family of approaches which share a certain sort of philosophy and a certain starting point, which is in contrast to how the kind of dominant systems around service delivery are currently organized. But yeah, whose terms we use or the precise language for me is kind of less important. I'm interested today in thinking about user-centered systems, because I want us to think about not just the amazing service delivery models that we're hearing about, but also, you know, the things that are kind of in place around them that either enable or restrict them. So, yeah, and again, sort of from my limited and subjective experience and viewpoint, it seems to me that there's a bit of a movement building around these sorts of approaches. There's, you know, one's seeing them kind of coming up all over the place, and which is wonderful and exciting, and also very necessary, because you can't change systems without building movements. One single initiative alone, however kind of innovative and however much it scales, is not going to do that, but a family of related initiatives that are sharing learning, gathering momentum, and kind of expanding their influence can slowly start to change the norms of how systems are organized. So how might we do that? So here's some bullets. This is a very oversimplified kind of list of what we might do to create more user-centered systems. We are interested here in starting with services. And I sort of emphasize this point because when people think about systems change, and I obviously kind of come across this a lot in my work, people usually go to like the big systems and the kind of policies and like, you know, and campaigning and advocacy and targeting those kind of elements that sort of can sit up the top layer and control the systems, which is obviously really important in systems change and has to happen at some point. But we can also get to systems change from the bottom up, which is what we're interested in today. And often, like, you know, it's you know, one has to kind of make people realize that these two things is not mutually exclusive. It's not either system change or service delivery. You know, service delivery can be done in a way which can kind of stimulate the way, the change in how the system operates and is organized. And so, you know, service delivery can provide a test bed, you know, a model, like to show, a tangible way of showing this is how the system could be, right? And without that, then it can become kind of abstract. So that's why it kind of, you know, I'm personally much more excited about sort of system change from the bottom up, because you can touch it, see it, feel it, and you can say, here's a different way of being, and I think that's kind of what's being, and hopefully will be shared again as we go through the panel. So that's obviously kind of the first thing. Well, the second thing to be done is to really kind of understand and learn from existing approaches and from different models of changing systems from the bottom up through user-centered delivery. So if you're thinking about kind of your own service, so project design and so on, obviously learning from existing ideas and kind of models and capturing ideas. Convening, engaging across the system. But particularly, obviously, it's users, and you know, every bit of the system, every person in the system will have a very sort of subjective slice view of how that system is organized. And so, you know, needless to say, in order to kind of really think about how that system should be organized and could change, we need to gather as much of it together, and so we can benefit from those different viewpoints. And listen deeply to them before kind of rushing into program design and making assumptions based on our own sort of limited and subjective viewpoint. And understanding, and obviously particularly from a service user point of view, different experience of the system and how it's working or not working for different people. You'll often hear people say, like, the system's broken or the system doesn't work, which is only partially true because systems always work for somebody. It's a question of figuring out who the system is working for and who it's not working for, because it's always working for somebody, because it's been designed in that way. It's often not working for the people that we need it to work for. So if we think the system's broken, like, chuck it away, that's not actually that helpful. If we can think, you know, where's this system? You know, whose interest is this serving, and who is it not? And how can we reorientate it so it's working in the ways it needs to be? So that's a kind of, I guess, like part of your systems analysis is really thinking about, you know, how that system works, aspects of it that you want to be different, and how you want them to be different. Sometimes you hear people talking about systems change like it's a kind of we'll get there when we know what it looks like. We'll know what it is when we get there. It's like, oh, the system has changed. But really being intentional about specific aspects of the system that you think need to be different to get the outcomes that you want, to be organized in the way that you want it to be organized. Think about your sphere of influence. So obviously, particularly from a service delivery point of view, how you can go from that on the ground, service delivery level to use that to, influence the system more broadly, and we'll hear some examples of that in a moment when I shut up. Allies. So everyone's got a limited sphere of influence. The more allies you can find who get what you're trying to do, the more you can expand your sphere of influence, and that's how we can kind of move towards a more systemic change process. Allies that kind of get what you're trying to do and can sort of create space for you, hold that space, allow you to kind of innovate and disrupt the system and do things a bit differently. I'm going to skip the design tools because that's going to get a little bit technical and we've a bit short of time. So yeah, of these bullets, the most important one is obviously to hear from and be inspired by those existing initiatives that embody some aspects of the system, some of the approaches that you think are needed in this sort of different system and how you want it to be. So we are going to do that now and invite our panel to come up and share some of their experiences and insights.